in the last 10 years or maybe in the last 15, 20 years or even more than that, the weight of financial services has actually gone up in Nifty. Just shows you how the sector has really transformed in the last 10 years. This is some data of very recent data just to show how the growth is coming. If you look at this period now, largely in the last 5 years, this term, it means that this cannot continue for very long. In the next slide, I'll show you why. I'm Harshvardhan Agarwal. I represent Bandhan AMC and I manage the Financial Services Fund. So I'll run you through the PPT of Financial Services Fund. So this fund was launched sometime in 23, June, July 23. So 2.5 years. And very quickly a brief background about myself. I've been covering this sector for around 10-11 years now. I started in 2014. So when we talk about financial services, when we talk about BFSI, see, generally what happens is everyone thinks that this is about banks, right? वो obviously because वो banks, अब HDFC बैंक का नाम लेते हैं अगर तो HDFC बैंक ही नहीं है, HDFC Life, AMC सब कुछ है, but HDFC is the brand. So everyone thinks about कि ये banking के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. But this is a common misconception that we have, because when you talk about BFSI space, especially in the listed universe in the markets, it's not only banks. We have broken it down into 5 subsectors, and if I were to break it down further, it becomes 20 subsectors. So BFSI per se is, we say, 5 subsectors and then 20 subsectors. So if I were to start with, say, banks, you have private banks, you have public banks. Public banks means PSU banks. You have small finance banks. You have something known as payment banks. I don't know if you guys know, there is something known as RRBs also. Obviously, they are not listed. There is something known as LABs also, local area banks. I don't know how many of you have heard them. These were all like kind of banks. Obviously, no LABs listed, no RRBs listed, but they are kind of different kind of banks. This finance, when I talk about it, is non-banking finance company. The famous example is Bajaj Finance, right? That comes here, but even within that, there are multiple breakups. Like housing finance companies are like HFCs अपन बोलते हैं, which is again a very common popular example. HDFC Limited was the largest HFCs at its time. Indabulls Housing, Diwan Housing, आज Bajaj Housing है वैसे. You have investment companies, which is CICs बोलते हैं इनको. You have Chola Holding, Bajaj Holding, TVS Holding, those kind of companies. Microfinance institutions, Credit Grameen हो गया, Satin हो गया, etc. So even when I say non-banking finance companies, NBFCs, even there you have multiple subsectors. Coming to fintech, obviously this is the buzzword. You have the Policy Bazaars of the world, the Paytms of the world, the MobiQuicks of the world, Fine Labs. Most of the listings now happening are in the fintech space. If I'm not wrong, there are 2 companies which are coming up for IPO, Kisht and PhonePe. So they are in the fintech space. Kisht is lending only, but it classifies itself as fintech. Capital markets, that is what we all represent, right? We are all capital market participants. Interestingly, this is one space which has rapidly grown in the last 10 years. So if I were to say in 2015, there were, in true sense of words, there was no AMC listed. No asset management company was listed back in 2015. वो AMFI classification या SEBI classification में कोई एक आधा AMC listed था, but वो it was not the AMCs that we call them as AMCs. Depositories तो थे ही नहीं. CDSL, NSDL, they got listed in the last 10 years. Exchanges listed नहीं. The first exchange that got listed, BSE, was at least in the last 10-12 years. You talk about exchange data platforms, financial product distributors like Prudent which is listed. Again, it got listed in the last 10 years. So trying to say, this capital market entities that we know of, obviously a few brokers were listed even at that point in time. Motilal was listed since long. But बहुत कम flavors थे, right? Insurance companies, general insurance companies only got listed in the last 10-11 years. Then again, the first life insurance company or pure play insurance company that got listed was ICICI Life. That was again 14-15 का time था. So trying to say that this capital markets only got listed flourished only in the last 10 years, and insurance also. So the key take here is, when you talk about BFSI, it's not only banks. You have 5 subsectors. Financial services में ही आपका fintechs आ जाता है, capital markets और NBFCs. BFSI में आई तो जनरली कोई बात ही नहीं करता, विच इज इंश्योरेंस देयर, एंड देयर आर 19 or 20 subsectors within that. Now when जब सर बता रहे थे कि when we look at the data we realize we are just scratching the surface of financial inclusion. This is a very commonly or very loosely used word, financial inclusion. Penetration नहीं है, but what do you mean when you talk about कि penetration नहीं है? So I'll just give you, just try to focus on these numbers. Again, this is, ये जो है, this is done largely by the government and telecom companies. We have moved from here to here. 20 crores Aadhaar. Aadhaar was, I think, started in 2010-11. Almost every Indian now has Aadhaar. Some 96-97% penetration है. Mobile data subscribers 117, I think 120 हो गया होगा number, but that is where we have. Almost every Indian now has Aadhaar card. They have a mobile phone connection. So that is what you would have heard about JAM Trinity. JAM Trinity is Jandhan Mobile Aadhaar. Sorry, Jandhan Aadhaar Mobile. JAM. Basically trying to say कि nearly every individual in the country today, individual से मेरा मतलब adult largely, has a bank account, has a Aadhaar number, has a mobile number. So means he is almost ready to do a lot of financial transactions on his own. Now वो जो अपने पहले डेटा देखा था उसी का कुछ दूसरे तरीके से we are trying to look at it कि our population is 145-147 crores, broadly that number. 150 is a thumb rule that people talk about. As I said, almost सबके पास आधार है, almost सबके पास मोबाइल है. We have some 80 crores PAN card holders. ठीक है, but when you look at these data points, which is where we say कि how many have actually invested in mutual funds, how many actually have invested in stock market directly via डीमैट, क्रेडिट कार्ड कितनों के पास है, कितने लोग टैक्स रिटर्न भर रहे हैं. टैक्स रिटर्न और टैक्स पेयर्स में डिफरेंस होता है, बट हाउ मेनी आर पेइंग टैक्स रिटर्न, कितनी लाइफ इंश्योरेंस, यूनिक लाइफ इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसीज हैं, कितने हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसीज हैं. दोज नंबर्स आर वेरी डिसमिल. एंड व्हेन आई से एमएफ portfolios of 25 crores, ये सर would know the exact number, but 25 crore people have not invested in mutual funds. Unique people is much lower. This is, if I am Harshvardhan Agarwal, if I have invested in Bandhan AMC में एक HDFC में एक ICICI में, तो मेरे 3 folio बन जाएंगे, but I am only one individual. So this is the folio numbers, not the individuals. If I am not wrong sir, ये नंबर कितना 8-10 के आसपास होगा, 8 करोड़ के आसपास, मतलब मोटा मोटा नंबर ऑफ टैक्स रिटर्न के आसपास का वो नंबर है. सो द पॉइंट इज, डीमैट अकाउंट का सेम है. आपके पास, आपने कभी IIFL में अकाउंट खुलाया होगा, कभी मोतीलाल में खुलाया होगा, कभी जीरोडा में खुलाया, आपके 3 डीमैट हो जाएंगे, बट दैट डजंट मीन कि आप वो 3 लोग हैं. ये नंबर भी बहुत कम है यूनिक. फेयर टू अज्यूम कि वो नंबर 10 के आसपास होगा, 8-10 करोड़ के आसपास, 12 करोड़. सो वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट only 10 crore individuals in the country have actually invested in mutual fund, have actually done direct stock broking. उनसे भी कम लोगों ने actually insurance policies ली है, health insurance policies ली है. And when you talk about credit cards, this is again the number of credit card. Unique तो 5 करोड़ ही. मतलब people have access via the JAM Trinity to these services, but they've not yet utilized that. So that's the gap you're talking about. और see, honestly, ये 10 करोड़ कभी 150 करोड़ नहीं होगा. Let's be very honest about that. 100% penetration कभी नहीं होगा. But even if we reach to 50% penetration, you are talking about 75 crores people having a demat account, credit card, etc., etc., etc. From current levels, it is easily 7x to 10x, that is the opportunity size that we are looking at. Or within the financial services space.
इसमें भी अगर हम वो, someone was saying that data कि even in that demat ना, the 50% of the people holds only less than 1 lakh rupees worth of holding.
हाँ.
मतलब again minuscule है, मतलब though the data says the 10 crore, but 50% people do not have a very
exactly
substantial allocation in that.
हाँ. So the same thing कि let's just say सर जो बोल रहे हैं कि अगर वो बंदा हर्षवर्धन है, मानो कि वो अभी उसके पास बहुत छोटा डीमैट पोर्टफोलियो है. With age and with growth, obviously his savings will improve. कुछ घर खर्च होगा, but मेरी savings बचेगी, तो कुछ savings I'll just start flowing back into saving investments, right? तो growth मुझे सिर्फ 10 crore going to 70 crores 80 crores वहाँ से नहीं आएगा. the individual will also grow, right? The existing 10 crore people will also grow. कोई बंदा इंजीनियरिंग करके इन्फोसिस में जॉब करता है, he starts with 3-5 lakh rupees annual salary. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, that 3-5 lakhs will become probably 30, 40, 50 lakh rupees salary. So his spends on his basic necessities will grow, but that would, as a percentage of total income, will reduce. Means his ability to save will grow exponentially. So that, we are not even talking about that growth that will come in. तो ये जो 7 to 10x अपन बोल रहे हैं, नंबर ऑफ पीपल से आएगा, वो ग्रोथ जो आएगा वो तो और अलग है. मतलब it's difficult to put a number behind it, that, but that is what it is. Now coming to the financial markets or capital markets, and just trying to link it back to the first slide that I showed you, कि BFSI is largely 5 subsectors and 20 subsectors. So trying to show कि यार ये how this sector has in a way transformed in the last 10 years or last 15 years, 2010 to 2025. I would like to bring your attention to this part which I was talking about. This is, so basically how to read this is the number of companies listed in that subsector in 2010, the number of companies listed in that subsector in 2025. So if I were to look at this capital markets wala area, asset management companies, hardly anyone was listed. Now we have 6 asset management companies, we have 3 depositories and clearing house, we have 3 exchange and data platforms. These are exchanges, BSE list हो गया, MSEX list हो गया, IX list हो गया. Financial product distributors, rating agencies, stock brokers. So as I said, 10-15 years back, stock brokers were freebie थे, but the real retail stock brokers only got listed in the last 10 years. You start looking at these companies, life insurance, general insurance companies. Most of the 70-80% of the industry is now listed. There was this MFI, MFI institutions. Now this number would have only, I think 6 or 7 हो गया होगा this number, because last year I think 1-2 और companies list हुए थे. SFBs that I was talking about, other banks, no small finance bank and payments bank है. 10-12 साल पहले concept ही नहीं था. Now we have around 9 or 10 small finance banks and payments bank listed. So that just shows you how the sector has really transformed in the last 10 years. Now this is some data of very recent data as to just to show ki how the growth is coming, and more importantly what you have to look at ki is the slope of this sort of lines. It is just upward trending. Obviously there could be some hiccups here and there, जैसे आप यहाँ पे देख रहे हैं कि वो बीच में March 25 में बड़ा लाइन दिखता है आपको, but you take out that one single incident, after that you look at that, it's generally upward trending line. It just shows कि the sectors are, all the subsectors are growing. Maybe the pace at time may be faster, slower, जो भी है, but the growth is there. More importantly on the banking system, which is the bread and butter of the BFSI, which is the backbone of the economy, honestly. So if that sector in the capital market keeps on growing, the economy does well. One data, again to emphasize how important the capital markets financial markets have been for the economy, and how they have actually performed over the period. And the flavor of this different way to look at this data, मैं sir को बता रहा था कि see how you think in terms of broader macro की at what pace the sector will grow. A very simple thumb rule is you look at the long term GDP growth rates. Generally India potentially 6 to 8% annualized real GDP growth होना चाहिए. So if you grow at anywhere between 6 to 8%, मोटा मोटा 10 साल में you double. So a 4 trillion economy will become a 8 trillion economy. Thumb rule, or maybe a 9 trillion economy. That's the real GDP growth. Real के ऊपर you have some inflation, which is अभी तो inflation almost zero है, but generally for a growing economy like India, inflation will be 3 to 5% or 4 to 6%. So you have the real GDP, you add the nominal, you add the inflation, then you get what you get is the nominal GDP. So real plus inflation is the nominal. So that's the nominal GDP. Nominal GDP is something कि यार मैं आज 1 लाख रुपए कमा रहा था, मैं 1 साल बाद अगर वो मेरा 1 लाख 20 होता है, So 20% is a nominal growth, right? What matters for individuals like you and me is the nominal growth. The real GDP is only for economists, honestly. For the markets, for an individual, what matters is the nominal growth. So you're talking about over a long term average, anywhere between 12, 13, yeah, 12 to 14, 12 to 13 is a better way to look at it. 12 to 13% nominal GDP growth. Banking as a sector has always done 1.1 or 1.2x of nominal. So if you're at 12% nominal, 1.2 of that, so 20% higher than that, so somewhere close to 13 is what your banking system will grow, the financial system will grow. So over a long period, that is what you would see. In Nifty 500, which is the 98-99% of the market, how Nifty financial services, which is I'm not talking about banks only here, financial services index covers insurance and other companies also, how that space has grown. And you take a block of 5 years. In a block of 5 years, this subsector has outperformed the broader market. The reason being, जो अपन बात कर रहे थे 10 crores going to 70 crores. Obviously, those numbers were lower 10 years back, but financials is the only space जहाँ पे ना you not only get growth because of the new people coming in, but also because existing people who are there in the system, they also grow, they also become rich. So that gives you a further growth. So that is why you are able to grow faster than the nominal GDP. So if you look at any 5-year period, financial services as a sector will give you higher returns. That is why in the last 10 years or maybe in the last 15-20 years or even more than that, the weight of financial services has actually gone up in Nifty. Obviously in the last 5 years things, that cycle has turned, everything is cyclical, cycles turn. But if you look at this period now, largely in the last 5 years, it has turned. It means that this cannot continue for very long. In the next slide I'll show you why. It means we are probably at the cusp of the cycle where financials will turn. So this what I try to do here, just to re-emphasize my first point as to why we believe financials, we at Bandhan basically believe financials are at the cusp of turning, is we're trying to look at the cycles of the market. And generally it is कि कोई एक सेक्टर का ना 3 से 5 साल का cycle होता है, कि that is a period when they do very well, and that is a period when they'll outperform the broader market, and then things sort of turn. So the way to read this is you start from autos. Autos largely from FY18 to FY22, those 4 years, it gave a 2% minus negative return. Negative return था basically, minus 2% broadly in that 4 years. Whereas Nifty gave you 18% compounded return during that time. Forward from FY22 to 3Q26, which is December 25. Nifty gave you 14% return, which is still fantastic, right? 18% return and 14% return, that is fantastic. But if you would have identified the auto ka cycle, you would have got a 34% compounded return since FY22. The point is, a sector which doesn't do well for some period, in the next cycle it does very well. That is the nature of the market. That is the nature of that's basic human nature, right? I'll just take a cricketing analogy, and मैं थोड़ा बुड्ढा हो गया हूँ तो मैं सचिन तेंदुलकर, I like him. He had a very good phase, right? I don't know किसने शारजा 96-97 में शारजा के मैचेस देखे थे. It was fantastic. 2003 तक he was the king. 2003 to 2007-8 he was a dud. Recently that is what has happened with Kohli, right? After a very long period of time, Kohli is behaving like King Kohli. Otherwise तो कौन सा कोहली था आपने को पता ही नहीं. So it happens with everyone. Just coming back to the same data point, IT 16 to 19 underperformed the broader market. Nifty 10% return, IT 7% return. Next 3 years, Nifty 18% return, IT 27% return. That way you look at utilities. Utilities 20 to 23 minus 5% compared to the market. Post 23, 15% outperformance compared to the market. You look at pharma, 18 to 21 underperformed the market by 4%. Since 21, 11% outperformance compared to the market. BFSI has been through this cycle. ऐसा नहीं कि this has happened first time with BFSI. 11 to 14 or 10 to 14 was a period when banking was just coming out of a very bad phase of GFC. A lot of NPS cycle had, especially in the retail, NPS cycle had turned bad. Corporate वाला तो आया ही नहीं था वो तब तक. Flat returns, like they sort of equal perform the market. Next 3 years they gave a 10% outperformance, which is big. In if you come to think of it, if you have a portfolio where 20% is allocated to BFSI during this space, during this time, and 80% is say एक निफ्टी का 100 रुपये मैंने निफ्टी में डाले हैं और एक दूसरा पोर्टफोलियो जहाँ पे 80 रुपये मैंने निफ्टी में डाले हैं और सिर्फ 20 रुपये मैंने BFSI में डाले हैं. That 20% वाला BFSI portfolio will overall give me 2 to 3% higher returns than the other portfolio, which over a long period it generates quite a bit amount of alpha. आप जब केगर करने बैठेंगे आप रियलाइज करेंगे. So 11 to 14 में BFSI didn't do well. 14 to 17 BFSI did well. Interestingly, last 5 years BFSI has given you exactly 0% returns compared to the market. मतलब flat market returns ही मिले आपको. 2026 I don't know. No one can get, outsmart, outguess the market क्या होगा. But the belief is that this is the time when, or this is the year when BFSI will start outperforming the market. And the reason to put these numbers here is to highlight कि जब sector turn होता है, generally that cycle lasts for 3 to 4 years or 3 to 5 years. That is the broad period. About exact, no one knows, but that is what the data says. Now, so this is largely on the sector as to why financial services is the backbone or is the bedrock of the economy, because wherever you go, right, you can't deal without money. That's there, potential is there, the space is immense, right? From, I don't know, this is the exercise that we did some 7-8 months back, and of the 5,000 companies listed in entire BSE space, there are some 1,000-1,200 companies within the BFSI space. अब obviously 1,000-1,200 तो कोई cover नहीं कर सकता, कोई देख ही नहीं सकता है. अब Pareto principle होता है honestly कि 5,000 में से 3,500-4,000 कंपनियां ऐसी होगी जो no one would want to touch them. Even of the 1,000 companies that we are talking about, who are probably in the are like your investable companies. We at Bandhan, we cover somewhere around 700 companies within the team of us. We believe that of the market, these 700 companies are investable, and at some point in time, if you find investing opportunities, we'll invest in them. Within these 700 companies also, BFSI companies are 150 alone, 140, 150 are BFSI company alone. बाकी जो 550 कंपनीज है, दैट इज स्प्रेड ऑल ओवर IT, ऑटोज, मेटल, फलाना ढिमकाना, फार्मा हो गया, कंज्यूमर हो गया, वो सब. सो BFSI still is the largest space in terms of where the opportunities may be available by the sheer number of companies also. So that's the thought of the sector. Now just a few minutes on the fund that we run, Bandhan Financial Services. So as I said, when we talk about BFSI or financial services, it's not just bank, it's a diverse sector. I told you around 150 companies हम cover कर रहे हैं. I think the space is around 200-250 companies, and the wider set of companies, 150-200. This is largely, so why financial services and not Nifty Bank, like Nifty Bank and Nifty Financial Services. Nifty Bank only consists of those banks, as I said, private banks, PSU banks, and one SFB. वो अदर बैंक में खाली वो एक SFB है और कुछ नहीं है, ये स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक. It just excludes all the other space of within the BFSI landscape. Financial services index is large, still covers a lot of space, but still it loses out on many spaces. Our BFSI fund tries to cover most of this space. Now obviously this is contingent on opportunities being available, because now just I'll want to show you, I don't know if you have mentioned it here, but we are not mentioned it here, but it comes under NBFC. So for a large part of 23-24 we didn't own any of the MFI companies. because the sector was not, that subsector was not doing well. There was no opportunities to invest in that space. But today we have a few exposure to MFIs because we believe the sector has come out of a rut. Things would do well for the next 2-3 years. So today we have some exposure to MFIs. So just trying to say that the fund will focus on all the aspects of the BFSI space, obviously depending on the available opportunities, valuations, the thought or the direction of the market that we have. We may not be present in 1 or 2 companies here and there, but the thought is to have some exposure to a broad part of the market. This is just the bench returns compared to the benchmark since inception. So it's a two. So this is Nifty Financial Services. अगर हम इसको निफ्टी डाल दें तो शायद से will outperform. I don't know अक्टूबर 23 से निफ्टी के अगर क्या है, लास्ट एक साल में तो 8 या 10% रिटर्न है. निफ्टी का
माइनस है, 15 महीने का रिटर्न माइनस है.
15 महीने का रिटर्न माइनस है. मेरे को जैन 25 से याद है कि जैन 25 आई थिंक 8-9% रिटर्न है.
8%.
हाँ. So I don't know June, August 23 से क्या है, but I'm sure if you plot that, the fund outperformance would be even higher. And then the Nifty returns are lower, basically. This is just a breakup compared to the index. Now again, Nifty Financial Services Index, the problem is it is still over indexed to banks, because of that is how the index creation methodologies work. Okay, a company with higher market cap tends to get oversized allocation, and the 3-4 large banks in India, they get captured in 75%. So our intention is as to spread ourselves or to get exposures, more active weights in the companies which are not in index. So obviously our weight in index is lower. Now the question comes ki yaar, you're talking about 150 companies that you guys cover. How do you select the companies up? What is the method to madness? What is the approach in selection? So the approach in selection is typically very grounds up. We as a team, including me, my colleague, we tend to do a lot of visits. We visit the branches, visit offices, meet managements, post results. So अभी जैसे अभी रिजल्ट सीजन चल रहा है, 10-12 फरवरी के आसपास रिजल्ट्स खत्म हो जाएंगे. Post that we would be on road for a few days. We'll try to meet management, meet distributors. बहुत तरह के लोगों से मिलने की कोशिश करते हैं, just to get a ground feeling as to what the companies are doing. Because management may say you one thing, it is our job to verify what the management is saying, whether what they're saying is correct or not. So that's the part. So the point is it's a bottom up stock selection. We don't say कि यार ये इंडेक्स में है, इंडेक्स में इतना वेट है, इतना वेट ले लो. That we don't do it. It's a bottom up stock selection. Those 130-150 companies that we cover, we try to meet each of those companies at least once a year or at least twice a year, depending on whether the companies we have already invested in that company or we believe it's not worth investing तो साल में एक बार. This is a very actively managed funds. Our active weights आप देखेंगे जब हमने previous slide पे दिखाया था. We are like largely underweight banks. So obviously 20% underweight है, तो that 20% weight has been deployed somewhere else. It's largely actively managed. It's a growth oriented portfolio because the thought is from the initial slides कि opportunity ही इतनी है, वो that 10 crore people are going to grow at 70 crores. We have to identify companies who are bringing those 60 crore people into mainstream. Right, वो 10 crores people तो grow होंगे ही होंगे, but those 60 crores people are going to grow. Which are the companies who are bringing those 60 crore people into mainstream? And that's a kind of a stock selection that we do. So that is where we get growth. And it's a flexi cap approach. We don't say कि यार this is a very small cap, yes 300 crore company है, we won't invest in it. The only point I'm trying to tell कि we even evaluate companies who are very very small, 100-200 crore market cap also. We evaluate them diligently. If it fits our approach, we do invest in them. This is the breakup of the fund. So if you remember, I was saying we are 20% underweight banks, 75 or 55 largely. So this is the broad breakup. Banks, obviously ICICI, HDFC, Kotak, Axis, SBIs of the world है हमारे पास. This is NBFCs trying to play via Cholamandalam Holdings है. This is the holding company. Housing finance companies, NBFCs, ratings companies, capital markets, AMCs, brokers, insurance companies, fintech companies. So just to pat our back, Bandhan as a house was one of the early backers of Paytm post the debacle, not during the IPO, but post the debacle. Bandhan as a fund house was one who identified that there's a large mispricing in the stock. We invested, obviously we benefited, the unit holders have benefited from that. So that is largely on the sector, on the fund. Just 2 or 3 key points that I would say on the sector, on the fund sector. Immense opportunity. That 10 crore people who are there will eventually go to 70-80 crore. So you're talking about 7x growth वहाँ पे, plus जो existing growth जो आता है as an individual growth, that itself will give you immense growth. So sector is deep, it's vast, it's ripe for growth. Valuations are attractive. I showed you how the sector turns, how the cycles turn. We believe we are at a cusp of a rebound in the BFSI space. Lastly, about the fund, it's a very actively managed fund, growth oriented, bottoms up approach. We evaluate the companies diligently, and we don't want to hug the index. We want to take large active calls so as to give our investors that better returns, that 15% versus 13% of the index returns that we showed. That's the aspiration from the fund to the investors. We keep on giving you superior returns compared to the index. So that is all. These are some regulatory things. As I said, the fund is managed by me and my colleague Ritu, and this is the debt portion, and वो थोड़ा SEBI का होता है. We as a fund we have not invested in debt. Just to be very clear. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.